Good afternoon, West Ham fans. Let's talk about the 5 things we've learnt from the international break at the moment. And a very good afternoon. Monday, it's rainy, weekend's gone too quickly, it's a bit cold as well, but the prospect of Fulham away is warming the cockles of our hearts with Premier League football back this weekend, thank God. But we still got another round of international games. And so what I thought I'd do is look at how our players have performed internationally in terms of the first team and come up with some sort of conclusions. Now, appreciate it's just one game, but it was really interesting, and there's definitely some things we can take out of the first round of the international matches in terms of 5 things we've learned when it comes to the international matches and West Ham. So let's crack into number one. Number one is feed the Fulk and he will score. Nicholas Fulk, the Fulkrug, the Folkster, Folkomania. Can't think any more Folks. Now, the experienced former Borussia Dortmund man has been a regular starter for Germany over the past 2 years. 31-year-old is far from a fashionable striker. We know that. He's very much a throwback to a bygone age of strikers, really. And he does have quite an uncompromising style of football, which I really enjoy, and should be really suited to the Premier League. Now, obviously, Germany played Hungary over the weekend, and I'm hoping that Julien and Tim were watching in earnest the action because Nicholas started and operated as his usual central forward position during their sort of rout of Hungary, and put in a really, really good performance, actually, all-round good performance. I think 7, 8 out of 10 possibly, and got a goal as well. So, if you assists, if you put balls in the box, he will score them 9 times out of 10. But what I did notice was how Germany was set up, and he really did seem to flourish in the way they set up. Maybe because now we've signed him, I'm taking more interest in Germany, in the international football and their setup. But it's definitely something that we can incorporate, and we've got the men to do it. It's whether Julien will tailor and work with that formation and that way of playing in order to get the best out of Nicholas. I don't know. The main reason being was Nicholas was like the centre, obviously, the apex. But he had the wingers, rather than being sort of out on the wing, they're very narrow, almost as like 2 10s behind him, really. They had Musiala and they had Wirtz, and both players operated sort of very much, rather than as traditional 10s, as wingers, were playing almost like a traditional 10 roles. And it was really interesting because it allowed the fullbacks, so they had Kimmich and Rahm, Joshua Kimmich and David Rahm, as the fullbacks. Now, we could easily incorporate that. And I think actually that would work best for all parties, really. Kadusi's wasted on the left-hand side, as a sort of a traditional left-handed winger, behind a back three. Bowen operates. I quite like Bowen operating in the middle anyway, as well. So by pushing, Nicholas up front, Kudus and Bowen behind him as sort of traditional 10s, as 2 narrow wingers, and then the likes of Emerson and Wan-Bissaka overlapping, we could do that, and he would look, and you would see you'd get more out of Nicholas, that's for sure. And we'll be interested to see if he takes advantage of that. Obviously, we've got the players to do that. And there were no wide. I mean, Wirtz and Musiala were no sort of wider than maybe sort of the edge of the 18-yard box. So it literally was very narrow, and you could see he was playing off. He was dropping balls in. He was letting them run on ahead of him rather than sometimes being the main focal point as well. I just think it could, you've got Emerson bombing forward, who naturally likes to do that. Wan-Bissaka's clearly got has got the kahunas to do that as well. And I think if you want to see the best out of Nicholas, that would work really well. They can't, Bowen and Kudus not hugging the touchline wouldn't work for Nicholas. He needs players around him, and that as a narrow 3 would work really well, I think. So that's number one of the things I've learned from the international break. But if he chooses not to go with that, number two, Bowen as a striker. Now, obviously, Jared was on the bench for Lee Carsley's first match in charge against Ireland. Obviously, 2-0 victory with Rice and Grealish both scoring for England. But what was quite interesting was when Bowen did come on. When Bowen came on, he didn't come on the right-hand side as such. He came on and played and operated as a more central striking option, which is interesting because Lee Carsley coming in, he obviously potentially sees Bowen as more of a central option as well, or having the ability to be a central option. And he didn't look out of place at all. I thought he probably did more in that time than Harry Kane did for the rest of the game beforehand, in terms of, in all honesty. There's a couple of shots on target, looked busy. Defenders looked a bit nervous when he was on the ball because he was running at them. He could obviously do quick 1-2s with like whoever's playing at the 10. And maybe this is something that obviously this was something which was employed by the previous regime. We know that, but does give us an option. If in the same way that Nicholas and you play the 2, and if they do decide to make Bowen a more central strike option, personally, I prefer him as on the right hand side rather than up front. But I'm just a fat bloke from Hornchurch talking to a webcam. I just think he physically doesn't have that sort of. I don't know. Just doesn't seem physically strong enough to. I suppose it would mean a complete different change of style, but obviously hoofing up balls to Bowen to try and out jump, James Tarkowski or something like that, or Harry Maguire. It's not going to work, and he's going to lose a lot of possession like that. But maybe, obviously, it might work. Bowen more centrally means Kudus can be operated potentially on the right. Somerville comes on the left. Paqueta goes into the 10 role, and then you've got players playing in their favoured positions, with the exception maybe of Bowen. I don't know. Bowen likes playing a striker. Obviously, we'll potentially grab more goals, but he does give us an option, and it might sort of be a useful stopgap in terms of, we were linked with John Duran and we were linked with pacey strikers. We didn't get a pacey striker. Maybe he could be that role and then in January reassess potentially. I don't know. But that's my number 2, my number 2 in terms of things I've learned. Number 3, Mavropanos. Mavropanos, I think, potentially has given Julian Lopetegui a selection headache ahead of the game against Fulham at the weekend. We're fully aware that we've obviously bought 2 new centre-halves, Maximin Kilman, and we've bought, obviously, Jean-Claire Todibo. Now, it's obvious that is part of the plan of Julien to play those 2 as our main 2 with Mavropanos as backup. However, on Saturday, Greece played Finland in the Nations League, where Dinos played the full 90 minutes, and he was spectacular. He had a fantastic game. He didn't put a foot wrong, didn't score, but they kept a clean sheet. And he did impress in possession. He barely put a foot out of place, 91% pass completion rate. On top of that, no play on either side, completed more dribbles than Mavropanos, he wasn't dispossessed with the ball at his feet once during the whole game. And that's not something that he's demonstrated really this season so far. It's the lack of concentration, particularly last year. He was placed in the 12th percentile of Premier League defenders for passes completed per 90 minutes. But this was a completely different game. Even without the ball, he was quite impressive as well. He won 100% of his attempted tackles, completed 3 interceptions, 7 ball recoveries, and he kicked the ball off the line as well. Now, particularly with Jean-Claire, maybe not looking as sharp yet, as match fit as he did when he came on, when he started against Bournemouth, didn't look particularly match fit, and only won 25% of the duels. I wouldn't be surprised if you see Mavropanos maybe featuring a lot more than we thought he was going to do. There's definitely an option there, and if Todibo gets the nod and doesn't perform, then Mavropanos comes in. If Mavropanos doesn't play well, then Todibo's got the nod. So it's quite interesting. It's not all cut in stone set in stone in terms of a Kilman Todibo partnership. Mavropanos, if he plays the way he played on Saturday against Finland, would really give Julien a headache in terms of selection, and that's what we want. We want players to know that there's someone else, raring to go behind on the bench, so that to put that added pressure to his, just because you've got the starting shirt this game doesn't mean you're going to get the starting shirt next week if you don't perform, and that's only going to improve us as a side and as a squad. Number 4, Areola. Areola's back injury clearly isn't as bad as we isn't. I don't know. I'm trying to think of the word. He should be back for Fulham, basically. What I'm saying is, obviously, he went off. He had a back injury went off against Man City, and at half time, I think he collided with the post. It looked like, but it doesn't seem that was too bad. Because he didn't withdraw from the French squad, but also he was on the bench for their game against Italy on Friday night. I think it was Italy. Didn't get any minutes, but the fact he was on the bench was a good sign. And also the fact, and I think they play Spain tonight, so I imagine he might get on the bench or maybe even get some minutes tonight. You never know, but it's encouraging to see that it's not as bad as maybe first feared. Going off at half time is usually it's a relatively serious issue, but it doesn't seem to be that bad, thankfully. So that's my number 4. And number 5 is the old guard, and a number of poor performances from the old guard, as I call them, which gives credence to bringing in obviously we've got players who aren't on international duty, who have been training. Obviously, they beat Dagen Rebic 5-0 last week. The likes of Wan-Bissaka, the likes of Alvarez obviously didn't go on the international duty to sort of keep his recovery going following his injury. Obviously, Somerville, Wan-Bissaka, Emerson, these guys obviously weren't playing. Kilman, these guys were still at Rush Green this week. And it does seem that there was a number of poor performances from players of the old guard, as I call them. So Antonio, Souček and Soufal all had torrid international performances over the weekend, which suggests maybe it's time to move on and bring in, replacing the likes of Soufal for Wan-Bissaka. I think that's pretty much a given, but if anything, it showed that actually these guys were maybe not coming to the end of their usefulness at West Ham, because I think they're still very good squad players, but maybe not guaranteed first team players as they used to be. Indeed, looking at the Czech boys, the Czech national press laid into the performances, particularly of Thomas Souček, following obviously being captain as well, but his side's 4-1 defeat to Georgia. Both Thomas and Vlad both played the full 90 minutes in a very underwhelming Czech performance, and indeed, as a result, the sides sit at the foot of their bottom of their Nations League table after the opening round of group fixtures. They play Ukraine on Tuesday, so we'll see if there's an uptick in performances there. Souček was scored a 3 out of 10 by iSport.cz and was quoted in saying that he didn't wake up throughout the whole game. So a very poor performance for their captain. Soufal didn't necessarily blaze himself in glory either for that performance. And Antonio had a bit of a stinker, really, in terms of Steve McLaren's first game in charge of the Reggae Boys. A 0-0 home ball draw with Cuba. Antonio being the main focus for most of the attacks. And only had 2 shots on target and one and only one was offside as well. He only had 26 touches of the ball throughout the whole game and only managed to complete 33% of the dribbles during the match. So not a great game for Mikhail as well. So again, suggesting point 1 and 2 to be more poignant than ever. And that's it, my friends. As I said, keep an eye on the channel. If there's anything I've missed or any points you want to make about the international matches you've seen so far, please let us know in the comments below, because I find it, obviously we all take different things out of the games. If you're new around here, thanks for joining. If you like what we do, give it a like, because it helps. It does help, and it's free. It takes literally a second. Or put a little comment in the bottom. We read them all, read all the comments as always. And until next time, take care, stay safe, stay warm, stay humble, keep the faith, my friends. And I'll see you guys very, very soon. Much love. Ta-da. Bye-bye.